Elizabeth's made it in, Sam. So
has she? Oh, good. Okay, brilliant. I suggest we make a start. So just to point out that we are recording this session. So firstly, a massive welcome to everyone who has come along today. Thank you for attending. We recognise your time is precious, but we think that this is going to be a really kind of insightful session. The recording and the slides will be circulated after the session. This series of events forms part of our Evaluation Collective series. We put on various different events each year on topical issues around evaluation. We have our Evaluation Collective website. If you're not familiar, do have a look at it. It's a WordPress site. We've also got a new LinkedIn page for the Evaluation Collective. And on our website, we've got a manifesto which just explains kind of what the Evaluation Collective is about and our philosophy and ethos around evaluation. I'm delighted today to welcome a really excellent range of speakers who are going to talk about everything AI, from ethics of using AI for evaluation research to discussions around how AI can help with theory of change. We also have a series of provocative views from the sector on the value of AI, which we hope will kind of stimulate your thinking on the role. And we hope that there will be the opportunity for rich discussion on your kind of reflections on AI, if you use it, if you don't use it, kind of your reflections on practice. So without further ado, I'm really keen to introduce the first speakers, which is Liz Austin and Lucy Clegg, who will talk about ethics and key ethical considerations when it comes to using AI. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Just to say, I've been having a few connectivity issues whilst you've been talking, Sam. So if for any reason you can't hear me, I don't know how you can let me know, but I just thought I'd put it out there before I start. So yeah, I'm Lucy Clegg and I'm from Sheffield Hallam University, and I'm here with Liz Austin today. The two of us are going to briefly talk about ethical issues in relation to using AI in research and evaluation. So yeah, we all know that AI is everywhere these days, but I guess the question is, what does it mean for us as evaluators? And we just thought that before we dive into this, just thought we'd have a little moment to think about how we might all use AI in our evaluation work. So there's kind of maybe some more obvious things that we might do with it, but there's other things that people are talking about at the moment that we could use it for. So I was just thinking, as we kind of progress with our slides, whether you could kind of put some thoughts in the chat about what you might have used AI for in your evaluations, or what you think that you could use it for in the future.
I'm on a call.
Yeah, turn their microphones off, please. I think somebody's got their microphone on. Thank you. Yeah, so if you could pop any ideas in the chat. Hold on, I've been muted as well. Yeah, so if you could pop any ideas in the chat, that would be great. There's a few ideas there to kind of get you going. Julian, could you put the next slide on, please? So yes, I'm just going to hand you over to Liz now, who will just give you a quick rundown of some key ethical principles for AI.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everybody. Nice to see everybody today. I'm Liz Austin. First of all, I think it's important to say I'm not an expert in this at all. And I think quite a lot of us who are presenting today have some insights into this because it interacts with lots of things that we do, but we're not providing an expert perspective. We're bringing a platform for us to talk about that. So that'd be really interesting to know what people's views are. Lucy and I talk research ethics quite a lot, and we know where we would go to understand and guide our research ethics practice and evaluative ethics practice. But it did raise some questions for us about where AI intersects with research and evaluation ethics. Having had a little look out there, and I'd be really interested to know if anybody else has got any kind of working guidance on this. The kind of things that I was looking at in relation to ethical principles were much broader than evaluation. So what I thought I might do is just relate them to our context in this kind of introductory segment. So a couple of examples. The UNESCO ethical principles I've found really useful. I think they provide an overview of some of the things that we've already started to talk about in our own institution and in other spaces. And I've just pulled out some of these. The application of these principles in the examples that I've given is specifically to ChatGPT, but I know that AI is more encompassing than that, and there are different varieties of AI that we can use. But I think the examples that are on the screen and then in my next slide just give an example of the unethical or ethical parameters of AI use when we're talking about that kind of generative aspect. So the first ethical principle that UNESCO asked us to consider and have related it to ChatGPT use in particular is the notion of fairness and non-discrimination. So there's a concern about AI and its stereotypical and often discriminatory outputs. And possibly there are connected controversial adverse effects of this kind of use. And I think when we're thinking about our evidence use in relation to evaluative outcomes, the fact that many of us on this call will be working in widening participation or EDI contexts, then the notion that the tools that we use might be exacerbating stereotypes and discrimination is something which is of an ethical concern for us. There's also a comment here around transparency. The fact that we don't really know how ChatGPT in particular, but some of our other kind of AI models, how they are being designed and how they are being used. And I know if you have the kind of evaluative mindset like I do, which is a desire to know and understand, that kind of evaluative thinking, evaluative minds, that really does provide a lack of confidence in the tools, particularly because we don't understand the workings of them. There's an ethical dimension, particularly around the environment. I know that in putting this session together today, I had a play around with AI, play around with ChatGPT, and I know that Jill's on the call today. Jill Lebean from Sheffield Hallam will talk to us and has talked to us at Hallam about the environmental costs, the water usage, the issues for the environment of our playing. And if we moved into a more substantial use of AI in this way, what are the ethical implications for the environment? So the huge amount of energy it takes just to type in and answer one of our questions or one of our explorations within this kind of work. So there is definitely an ethical environmental concern with what we might want to be testing and what we might want to be using AI for. If you could move me to the next slide, Julian, that would be great. Just to carry on this notion of ethical principles. There's a comment here, and again, I thought this was pertinent around economy and labour. Concerns about the impact of AI on labour markets. Now, some of the things that we'll talk to you about today is about how we might use AI to develop theories of change, how we might use AI for types of qualitative analysis or analysis transcription and so on. And there is an ethical dimension about ourselves and about our expertise and about our job security and the types of tasks that we might do and the value that we add to that and the implications of that being done elsewhere. The next point is around the kind of education and research in relation to the UNESCO principles. And one of the biggest concerns, I think, and I've heard talk about in relation to generative AI, is the fact that things might be wrong. Things might be, I like the idea of hallucination, that there's a hallucination aspect of generative AI, but there may be things that are not correct, that they go against that kind of accepted knowledge. And then if we are using evaluation for an evidence base for change, then that does really call into question those issues around validity, authenticity of the work that's been produced. And the final point, and Lucy will talk about this in a little bit more detail, is quite often a lot of the work that we do in evaluation is subject to data protection legislation, particularly around the collection of data. And again, this is an area where there are some concerns around ethics and around privacy, and where that data is used, stored, regenerated, repurposed within these AI platforms. So I'll let Lucy talk on the next slide in a little bit more detail about that.
Thanks, Liz. That was quite interesting, actually, about the hallucinated references. My son was doing a book review. They take it in turns in school. He's 10, did a book review at the weekend, and he did a little search online. I thought I'd get some stats for him using ChatGTP, and it told him there was 3 books in the series, and he was, oh, this is brilliant. I've only read 2 of them. Oh, can you buy me the 3rd one? So we went to try and find it, and there wasn't a 3rd one. It was made up. So yeah. So yeah, I'm going to talk about something less interesting than that. Data protection and privacy. So AI can be really useful for processing data, and so lots of people have made points in the chat. So that could be identifying themes or analysing trends, but to put that personal data into an AI, how do you say it? Into AI, can be quite risky if we're not careful. So these are kind of some ethical issues around the kind of issues that you might have in putting personal data into AI. So first of all, there's the risk of data breaches. So yeah, that's the kind of nightmare scenario, in particular if you're working with platforms outside of the UK or the EU. So I was looking at ChatGTP and what's it called, DeepSeek, isn't it? And that they're based in the US and China. The US and China don't need to adhere to GDPR standards, so there is a chance there that you could be risking something happening to your data that's sort of potentially dodgy. Secondly, evaluators can sometimes end up processing data in ways that people didn't originally consent to. And even though I guess none of us would probably do that intentionally, it can still happen, and if it does, it can still be problematic. And finally, if data isn't managed properly, it can erode trust, it can open you up to legal trouble, and it can even lead to kind of big financial penalties from the ICO. And obviously, none of us want that to happen. So got a few mitigation strategies here. So basically, if you're going to put personal data into AI, then you need to make sure that you're sticking to GDPR compliant platforms and processes. So knowing that your platforms meet the right standards. And like I said before, just kind of one of the easiest ways of doing this is to kind of see where that platform is based. But I would still kind of, if you're based in a university, you should probably have a data protection officer. It's probably best to kind of seek their advice on if you're going to be putting personal data into AI. Another way of mitigating that actually is changing your data, anonymizing your personal data properly. So that would mean more than just making it into names into pseudonyms. You really need to make sure that you take steps so that individuals genuinely cannot be identified. So that will be kind of data such as ethnicity and that kind of thing as well. That would also need to be removed because you can identify without the name. And then thirdly, if you're using AI in your research and evaluation, you should make sure that you get explicit and informed consent from your participants. So that's kind of making it clear when and why AI will be used in your research and getting consent specifically for that. So letting participants know that you will be using AI. And I guess just finally, it's worth saying that these aren't just kind of tick box exercises. This guidance is really to make sure that AI helps rather than harms the people we're trying to understand through our evaluative work. So yeah, it's quite important. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, Julian, there's a link there for what Liz was talking about, and that's me done for this part. So yeah, if you keep your thoughts coming in the chat, it's all really interesting, and we'll have some discussion about that later. I'm now going to hand you over to Andrew.
Thanks very much, Lucy. And yeah, really nice to see so many people turning out to talk about AI. I think it's a really urgent issue in our work, and I think it's important we do take some time out of our working day to think about it, which hopefully will help you to do today. So I'm kicking off the Petra session. So I'm going to rattle through some ideas on how AI might help develop theory of change in access and participation work. If you're not familiar with theory of change, it's becoming an increasingly important part of our work, I think, as evaluators, and the development of theory of change across the sector is something that we're being expected to do more and more. So if there are opportunities for AI to help support that work, I think it's something we should definitely think about and explore. But as with all things AI, there are lots of pitfalls to think through and be careful of. So If we can move to the next slide, please. I'm going to take you through 3 things that you might want to think about AI and theory of change. These are drawn from examples that I can't take credit for, because they're the fantastic colleagues I have at Leeds in the outreach teams there that are very interested in this stuff, and are using it to help them develop their theory of change for their outreach projects. And it is in conversations with them that we've kind of developed some of these thoughts and thinking. Yes, so credit to them for the kind of spearheading this work, I think. So the first thing that they've found useful, and that I think AI could be worth pursuing, support for theory of change, is a starting point for a literature review. So the prompt example on screen now is the kind of thing that I'm thinking of. So if you're trying to evidence a theory of change, so not just your thoughts in the room, but trying to draw in evidence from the sector, using AI as your starting point for a lit review can be a very helpful exercise. And there are now specific AI tools geared towards lit review. So Elicit is one. There's one that just launched today from ChatGPT called Deep Research, which takes this idea of lit review and kind of makes that the kind of specialism of the AI. However, as with a lot of things, AI is prone to mistakes, it's prone to hallucinations, so it cannot just be the thing that you do and then copy and paste it straight in. You have to check your sources, and you have to be aware that in our work, there's lots of grey literature that we would look at, think tanks, university reports, that won't come up in the kind of AI searches without some scaffolding and prompting, so that's something to think about. This is one that I've not actually tried yet, but I'm planning to do it at my next theory of change workshop, which is to take what you are left with after a theory of change work often, which is a bunch of sticky notes, a bunch of kind of thoughts, and then try and convert that into something more coherent that you could share. I think there's potential for AI to help with that, taking those kind of random thoughts, pulling through themes from them, and then helping you kind of draft that into a coherent theory of change document. Once you've got that first draft, and this is something that we've looked at already in our context, is providing feedback on that draft is something that AI can do. We actually stole this idea from a academic context where this was being floated as an opportunity to support student feedback, where students are will do their first draft of an essay, and rather than submit that to an academic waiting for weeks for that feedback to come back, they will, before they do that, submit it to a AI LLM to give them some feedback on it first. I think with this, the importance of giving it some guidance. So if you just put in, this is a theory of change, can you give me feedback? It will come up back with some guff, frankly. But if you give it some guidance as to what you want, the TASO guidance is a good example, I think, then it can give you some useful kind of working points. And I think that's a good first step before you then take it to someone like myself in an evaluation team role for some further pointers and further thoughts. It is, however, something that I think we need to use carefully. And my experience of linking to an outreach program description on a website and saying, can you develop this into a theory of change, please, has been very disappointing. So there are lots of things that it cannot do. So it cannot just take your outreach program, spit out a theory of change. And I think if you're expecting it to do that, I think you're misunderstanding what the theory of change is meant to be doing and the point of it. I think a real point to the theory of change process is to have that conversation about what the program is, getting stakeholders on the program around the table to agree on those themes and assumptions you're making. And so I think it is really important to maintain that human element and not just expect it to write it for you. It's also not great, in my experience, of converting the text into something more visual. So this was my attempt to take a written out theory of change under the kind of headings that we might be familiar with from TASO and turn that into a kind of flowchart diagram. And this is what it came back with, which at a distance maybe looks quite good, but as soon as you actually start to try and read the thing, it's basically gibberish. So it can't do that yet, but maybe it will in future. So yeah, final thought, remember, theory of change should be a living document, and that doesn't mean just something that you go back and edit over time, but it's something you develop as humans around the table, ideally with the people going to be involved in the project. And there's a really interesting evaluation collective event from last year about co-creation with students, which I'd encourage you to check out. And final thought is that if you are scared about AI, the very undervalued Alien franchise films Prometheus and Alien Covenant are worth a look, because Michael Fassbender as an android is terrifying, and if we're not careful, that's what we're heading towards. So yeah, that's my thoughts on theory change and AI. I think I'm about right on time. So I'll hand over to Naomi, who's going to take us through her Pechakucha. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. And I really liked the almost medieval tapestry that it created from your theory of change. That was brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to coherently talk about Deleuze and Guattari. So a bit of philosophy for you on a Tuesday afternoon. So focusing on AI and evaluation, so a very niche subject. So this quote from a colleague summarises the key thread of this presentation, that fundamentally evaluation is about human experiences. So what is AI's role in this? Next slide, please, Julian. Thank you. So evaluators are often seen as separate to an intervention. We're external to rather than part of. And we see this in a lot of the discourse that's around at the moment in terms of not marking our own homework. And there's this clear break between experience and evaluator. So the perception of evaluation is neat and tidy, and it's all tied up in these easily placed and defined boxes. There's a clear cause and effect of an experience leading to an achieved outcome. It's very neat and tidy, so evaluators are able to line those dominoes up and make it all make sense. But as an evaluator, this is more my personal experience. It's really messy, and we're trying to work out what the purpose of the evaluation is, who we're working with. And this, for me, really acknowledges more of our human experience. It's not neat and defined. It's merged into a bit of a heap. So we make sense of our experiences, and those experiences provide us with a sense of what is real. So that experience, learning, or an evaluation provide us with a verification of who we are and what's valuable to us. So when we apply that to our experiences of being human, we often state our reality and existence because we've experienced things. So as an evaluator, when we engage with evaluation data, we're also human. So we bring that understanding of what being human is in how we analyse and engage with that data. But can AI do that? Is it able to consider that unknown essence within the evaluation data? And as we've already heard, AI draws from publicly shared knowledge. So what is it included and excluded in that? So Deleuze and Guattari outline this way of knowledge creation as like a tree, where it has a central trunk of truth, and all of the branches grow from that central point. This is really repeated knowledge. It's the same from the same. So what's known to be true remains to be true, a bit like AI's filtering of what its truth is. A rhizome, in contrast, works as networks of knowledge and interconnected experiences. So thinking about the potentials of AI, it has the potential to think rhizomatically. But from where is it learning, and how does that then influence our practice? So as evaluators, we're often unknowingly thinking about and establishing those connections, not just with data, but with the people that we work with. So we're thinking rhizomatically, so horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. So lastly, Deleuze and Guattari talk about a war machine, and it's not a violent act, it's a disrupting and creative force. Rather than a systemized state, the war machine is nomadic. It has the freedom to roam, and it's this pure potential for change. So if higher education is a state system, what is evaluation's role within this? Are we state or are we nomadic? And how is AI positioned here? Is it boundless? And how can we as evaluators use this in our work? So I've got 3 provocations to end. The first is about evaluation as a human experience. AI does have a role to play in this, but we need to be mindful of our own place within it and ensuring that human experiences are core to creating change. Secondly, let's think rhizomatically. Let's challenge those binary trees and create connections between experiences. How can AI be another node in our network of knowledge? And finally, let's reflect on our own professional identities. Are we state machine or war machine? And how can AI enable us to grapple with this idea of pure potential for change? And I think that is my 5 minutes. So hopefully that's made sense. And I'll hand over to Julian and Stella.
Wow, it's amazing. I'm just taking that in. Sorry, you've just completely floored me. Right, so Julie and I are going to do a bit more of a kind of downbeat hip, potentially, Bloomster's dystopian overview. So what I'm going to do as well is that I'm going to do this slightly differently, and I'm actually going to signal that I'll gladly be a humanoid disruptor. And I'm going to, in a moment, waft my glum-faced aardvark to signal to Julian when he will change the slides. So I'm about to do that now. So you'll get that. Okay. So I thought it would be interesting to ask an AI tool to explain in its own words. So the responses to the following assertions I've done via an acrostic analysis. And just because I can, I'm going to form part of my disruptive Petra Stella rather than Petra Kucha. So I'm going to ask Julian. There you go. So I'm going to start with what AI actually told me when I put a question in about dubious interpretation. So their words exactly are, AI systems sometimes give odd answers due to ambiguity in input, where it leads to unclear questions leading to assumptions, bias in training data in that AI replicates existing biases or errors, limitations in understanding, that, and it argues that AI processes patterns but lacks genuine comprehension. AI is a tool with impressive capabilities, but is still not perfect and occasionally misinterprets things. Okay, evil ownership. Artificial intelligence itself doesn't have intentions or morality. It's all about the intent and actions of the people who control, create, or use it. So yes, answers the tool. If AI is under the control of someone with malicious intentions, it could certainly be used in harmful ways. Autocratic processing. AI's design and deployment determine its operation. Autocratic processing involves decisions made without input from others, but it also depends on the policies around AI rather than the AI itself. For instance, an AI used in an autocratic regime might be programmed to enforce strict surveillance, censorship, or control over citizens. Disadvantaged populations, which I think most of us will think this is of interest. So AI here has the potential to bring about significant benefits, but it can also pose risks and disadvantages to certain populations if not implemented thoughtfully. Here are some ways that AI can potentially disadvantage some groups: bias and discrimination, perpetuating historical inequalities, privacy concerns, surveillance that impacts marginalised communities, exclusion from decision-making, overlooking the needs and perspectives of marginalised groups. Okay, lucrative positioning. So whilst the lucrative positioning of AI has its merits, it also comes with several potential downsides. Job displacement due to automation, rising economic inequality, data privacy concerns, as we've heard, as AI systems require vast amounts of data, over-reliance on technology, leading to reduced critical thinking skills, and loss of human touch in those areas like customer services and healthcare. So balancing AI's benefits with these challenges require careful management and ethical considerations. Yobbish privilege. And I think most of us can identify who I'm really talking about here. So that's an intriguing question, says the AI tool. AI can perpetuate biases if not responsibly designed. Issues include lack of diversity in development teams and high costs. Creating disparities in access and an ethical framework, as we've heard, is crucial to ensure equity. So there you have it. All useful, but you should use it cautiously and critically. It's at your own risk. So I'm now going to hand over to my fellow Gloomster, Julian, and thank you for doing the slide so manly, for a more detailed critique. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. Hi, everyone. I'm Julian Crockford, a researcher evaluator at Sheffield Hallam University. Just a quick trigger warning for the next slide. It does feature a large picture of Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson, famously a boosterist, cast aspersions on the doubters, the gloomsters and the doomsters. And I count myself as one of those when it comes to AI. Boris Johnson's boosterism said that we would, probably get it wrong and everything would be brilliant. I'm less sure. Like Stella, I'm a bit of I am concerned about several strands or implications of AI in the evaluator space. The first thing is the kind of utopian vision that we might have of what AI will do for us as evaluators. It will churn away in the background doing the kind of qualitative analysis, the boring repetition, crunching of data, and produce neat, efficient outcomes for us, which hopefully will leave us free to do the exciting, innovative, creative human part of evaluation. And that's a vision I could sign up to. However, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to wind up like that. There's an article in the Telegraph, obviously, not the most radical publication. Roger Bootle wrote that there will be a marked tendency towards reduced working hours, and there's a danger in AI that it will mean that the value of human labour falls. And the quote at the bottom: if new technologies enable employees to profitably replace paid workers with machines, they will implement the change. Employers have little or no responsibility to displace workers, families, societies of the consequences left. And that's how capitalism's always functioned. So the concern is that as evaluators, been slightly Luddite about it, if AI replaces us, it will be a consequence of capitalism. So my beef is not with AI as such, it's how it might be used in the context, particularly in HE, where there is a financial crisis at the moment. The next aspect that concerns me is the possibility of grey goo. And I don't know if you remember the kind of alarm about nanotechnology, self-replicating machines that would chew up all the material in the world to reproduce themselves. Interestingly enough, another version of that scenario is the paperclip apocalypse, which you may be aware of. And it reminded me of Clippy, some of our first experience with AI, who attempted to help us out in Word by telling us what we wanted to do. But in terms of AI, the risk of the AI is that it turns everything into intellectual and cultural grey goo. So it basically combines stuff that already exists. And the diagram there shows that AI takes our evaluation outcomes, recycles it, recycles it again, and you don't get kind of human input. And the risk is that in a kind of resource sensitive environment, evaluation commissioners may decide that that's good enough. Maybe we don't need human input, maybe we don't need creativity, we just need the sludge that keeps churning through the system. And of course the logical conclusion is that both of those dystopias feed into each other. If we're laid off as evaluators and replaced by ChatGPT or whatever, then there's less human, innovative, creative, insightful stuff going into the network, and the grey goo just replicates and gets more and more grey and more gooey. So that's not a great outcome for evaluation, for culture, for intellectual thought. And that's it. So now I think we're going to throw open the floor for some discussion and questions. So I'll stop sharing so we can all see each other.
Thanks, Julian. I've got the task of trying to frame some discussion around that, and that's quite challenging. But so thank you for all the people that have presented. Thank you for both presenting the things that it could do, the things that we might be interested in doing, the things that we've tried, and again, people in the chat have also really transparently shared the things that they've been doing, alongside the things that we're worried about. And I think that was one of the key premises of putting this session on today, is that we tried to bring those two aspects together. Some of the questions that kind of came to my mind as people were talking today and having a look at things in the chat I'm really interested to know how our institutions are supporting us with this through our ethics committees, through our guidance and structures. So not just in the, there's a lot of work at the moment around supporting students with AI use in teaching, practical examples, but within our spaces, has anybody got any insights into how the sector or universities are supporting us with this? What do our ethics committees say about this? There is a big kind of premise around the value that we add as evaluators, that kind of human aspect. And it'd be really interesting to hear a little bit about what people might think about the value we add as evaluators. In a couple of those presentations, I liked the connection to complexity and messiness. And if we have to justify our worth in relation to complexity and messiness, then that's cool. I'm quite happy to be in that space and making sense of that. Although I do note that somebody in the chat also said, remember that we're not perfect either as humans. But how can AI deal with the messiness that we are dealing with as evaluators, and how we bring people together, like Andrew said, to support that, I think was a really important point. And to open the floor for a few minutes to let people ask questions, I'd be really interested to know whether anybody is now thinking differently as a result of some of the provocations that we've raised, or maybe has anything to share to take some of that discussion forward. So is there anybody on the call, if you want to raise your hand, if you want to ask a question or pose some reflections, now is the time to think about what you might want to say, what we might want to ask, what you might want to seek from the audience. If not, yeah, I'm going to have to keep filling the space. Anybody out there that wants to say something provocative or otherwise on AI? Elizabeth, hi, glad you got in to join us. Do you have a question or a comment or a provocation?
Yeah, thanks everybody for your presentations. I really enjoyed them, and thanks so much, Liz, for your hosting today. I think there's lots of things that come up from this discussion, and one of them is what kind of methods are we using when we're using AI. And I think maybe there's more of a propensity to use AI if you're from the more quantitative side of things rather than from the qualitative side of things, which is already much more humanly integrated. We're much more thinking about sort of participatory methods and building change together and having conversations around theory of change, like Andrew pointed out. And so maybe there's a tendency and a division between how we view AI and our understanding of what knowledge is, or understanding of, what the different epistemologies or paradigms that we're buying into. So if we have more of a positivistic understanding of the data that we're producing, then we may be more inclined to think that AI can do this job for us. And then if we're thinking more that it's co-constructed, this knowledge, or we're making it ourselves and from our own particular position and the interpretation that we're coming from on our data, if we're acknowledging that we have a role to play in how we're presenting and understanding the data in the first place, well, then I think that makes us lean more into Julian's lens and become much more sort of critical or questioning about its uses. So I think the status quo, as far as I can see, among all my colleagues, is that, yeah, we should use it because it's cost effective and we've got too much work to do. And so it's a great resource, but we should use it critically and be careful about how we engage with AI. But then I think, so the bigger question is are we doing that in a way that's going to prevent us from having conversations with other people about the bigger systemic and structural changes that we want to happen as a result from our work?
Brill. Thanks, Elizabeth. Really useful reflections, bringing in that kind of element of knowledge and how we view knowledge. And interesting. It might save us time and money. It might kill the planet in the meantime. I think there's a dimension to think about there in terms of our own our own boundaries, but then also the wider implications, thinking about that environmental and sustainability piece. But it's a difficult lens to consider our practices through. I think Julie wants to come in and say something about that, so I'll open it to you.
Yeah, no, Elizabeth's sort of comment resonated with a question from Shaylee, who notes that they were wondering whether how AI becomes a distraction when planning a theory change or any other evaluation exercise, which I think is a really good point. And, I'm always distracted by the glitter of tech and exciting new ways of doing stuff, perpetual haunter of productivity, webinars and that kind of stuff. But it does, there is a risk that it becomes an end in itself. It takes us down a hallucinatory corridor, and it doesn't enable us to engage with what we could or should be doing, perhaps. Don't know if others had thoughts on AI as a distraction.
Thanks, Julian. Stella, did you want to come in on that one?
Yes, please. It's kind of linked, but not. It was a couple of things that came out from several discussions in the comments. First of all, I think there's a real danger, and I use AI, and I think it can be used in certain contexts. But I think we've got to be mindful that AI can actually destroy people's ability to think critically, and I think that's really problematic. The second thing, and it links to that, is who controls the knowledge production. And actually, if you look at all the massive conglomerates that are almost, corporate states in themselves, the inputs are critical, and who controls the input to what we see as perceived knowledge and wisdom is absolutely crucial. And at the moment, I'm not convinced that the toxic environment of the people who are creating that knowledge is something we should embrace. So I think there's a real health warning that I think we need to be far more critical of what we're perceiving as accurate AI at the minute. And that, for me, I would dispute, Elizabeth, what you said about embracing it. It's positivistic, but it's positivistic with a kind of very neoliberal on steroids approach, I think, with the way it's constructed. So, just wanted to raise those points. Thanks, Liz.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stella. And I can see that Shaylee's responded in the comments and feels quite strongly about whether there is a place and that there isn't necessarily a place for the use of generative AI in evaluation. And I think, that is a really important perspective that we consider as evaluators. Xuan Yan, you wanted to come in with a point. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, actually, my hand up is actually, I think that AI might help us in terms of thinking more critically, because we know that human beings are flawed, we make mistakes, and AI is the same. And as discussed previously, I think sometimes it really generates us to think more perspectives with different conditions and contexts. And my concern of the use of theory of change in our practice is using AI in our theory of change. Theory of change is based on the specific context in each institution or a country or even a wider space. And I think that it's really need to engage people. I agree with you, Stena. It's the human experience, and it's really important for evaluation. So I don't really think that AI can help us, in a way that other human beings, in practice can help us to think about theory of change, whether it's applicable, how we implement it. So I am really difficult to think about how we use theory of change, apart from help us do the literature review, gather more evidence, and think more critically of the model, how it works. So that's my response to kind of. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it goes back to the point that Stella said about thinking critically and bringing in that element of and the value that we place on the work that we do. I think they're really, really important points. Though I know that there has been some comments in the chat about some there are some warnings, I think, with literature review work, and we need to consider that as well. But also, yes, the theory of change as a construct, a concept, an activity, or I can't remember what Stella called it. What was the alternative word for theory of change that AI created?
Change blueprints.
Change
Because I'm
blueprint.
grappling with it. I still rather have that than theory of change, but that's for another day.
Yeah, I think there are interesting dimensions to it. So thank you for that. Elizabeth, did you want to come back in on that, on those points?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think there's an important difference between who might be more drawn to be using AI and who might have more faith in its ability to produce reliable results or reliable analyses or whatever we're asking it to produce. And then the types of knowledge that we know it does produce because of where it's drawing its information from. So, I mean, I agree with you, Stella, in the point that the knowledge that it's actually creating is already filtered and a very normative mainstream understanding of any topic that you ask it. So I've tried to engage Claude AI and from an anthropological perspective. And it doesn't have recourse to a lot of the material that's sort of standard stuff in anthropology because it's already a marginalized subject. So some of the diverse views that you may have in the discipline, or different ways of engaging with knowledge or information, is not capable of doing that. And I went through a whole series of prompts with Claude AI to try to get it to think differently. But what it does, it seems like it's been programmed in a way that's very much orientated towards a particular normative legal format. It's supposed to be ethical in the traditional understanding of what ethics is, and there's no nuance in there. There's no other perspectives. You couldn't ask it, for instance, to think from an indigenous perspective. It's very limited in the types of perspectives it can approach information from, and so that means that analytically it's very limited to that mainstream, and the most knowledge that we have out there or that it can draw on is the knowledge that has the most purchase in our society, and that's all the stats knowledge, it's all the quantitative knowledge. So I think the way that it's been programmed is producing a particular kind of knowledge and a particular perspective and reproducing a particular perspective. And I really like that point, Julian, on sort of just recycling and refabricating things that we already know. But then who's more drawn to it, or who may think that it is more objective, if we can think of that. I mean, objectivity, I think in our line of work is sort of the biggest epistemic virtue, isn't it? We're always trying to make our work objective and not overly subjective, even when we're stating our position. So I think there's a really interesting tension there between who's using it and then what it produces.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think if we position that, particularly for those of you on the call that are working within an English context, of a kind of a positivistic slant on evaluation from our, the regulator or the expectation of the type of evidence that we might be creating, there is something for us to consider there. Julian. Can't hear you, Julian.
Sorry, could do the I'd switch my mic on. So I'm just picking up on Elizabeth's comment and also a comment that Jessica put in the chat. And Jessica noted that she works in an AI positive institution, so that colleagues there don't necessarily have a choice about using AI. And I think it's interesting in the sense of, again, going back with my cynics Luddite hat on, what's the interest for institutions in being AI positive, what are the implications? But as Elizabeth pointed out, that sort of has implications for what evaluation practice will be in the future. As AI becomes embedded in institutions, it will encourage certain kinds of evaluation activity, presumably cheap and non-human, and it sort of forecloses the possibility of other forms of evaluation that we might want to push forward, those that are more human or interpretive or collaborative or draw on individual tacit knowledge that may not be documented and swallowed up by AIs. So sorry, that's another concern. It's it's not the tool, it's who's using it and how, as many of us have noted.
Well, thanks, Julian, and yeah, lots of stuff in the chat about that as well. Naomi, I'm going to come to you, and then I'm going to move to Sam to close, I think.
It was just to follow on from those kind of two thoughts, really, in that we can't just blame AI. I think there's already systems and structures within the evaluation world of HE which direct us to using specific methods, specific literature. And when we're thinking about the new evidence base that's being created with TASO and HEAT, it's that what's deemed as robust. And actually, if that's what AI is going to be drawing from in terms of the system of knowledge, again, it's just perpetuating what's already there. So I think it's not just saying it's AI's fault that we're all doing this method or this is the way we're thinking. It's about that bigger systems and processes around it, which are created by humans.
Absolutely, and humans who should have the ability to think critically and speak critically about that. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Naomi. Thank you for summarising that. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the things you put in the chat as well and for engaging in that discussion at the end. It's been great. I'm going to pass over to Sam, who's going to close for us, and then we can all go and eat our lunch.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz. So just a really big thank you for attending today. We hope that you found it useful and thought-provoking. Just a flag, we will be running our next Evaluation Collective event on the 11th of March. We're very lucky to have John Blake, who is going to attend the session, and we're going to send him over questions beforehand. So he will be there to answer questions on everything relating to APP and evaluation, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those questions as possible during that session. If you would like to attend, you just need to complete the registration form, which I will put in the chat in a moment. But I think it's going to be a really, really excellent event and would encourage as many people to attend as possible. When you register, there's the opportunity to add any questions that you might have, and then they will be fed back to John Blake in advance of the session. Right, I will pop the link in the chat. And lastly but not least, I'd like to thank all the presenters for their work on this session. Without them, this would not have been possible. I think we'd all agree it's been an absolutely fantastic session. So thank you. Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sam.
Bye.